All right, Saagar, what are you looking at?
From day one of the war of Ukraine and the debate about military aid to that country, we have been assured by policymakers of one thing. Aid to Ukraine is making America stronger. Ukraine is fighting our enemy for us, the anti-Russian neocons say. So the ammunition that we're sending them, it's just surplus. We barely need it. Or we have plenty of capacity to take care of Ukraine and take care of ourselves and our allies. Obviously, the sheer dollar figure size of the $100 billion has always exposed that as a farce. But they've clinged to it nonetheless. And since conflict has now been going on for more than a year, some truth has begun to actually trickle out. Not only about the aid to Ukraine and whether it's actually even being used in the way that we want to, but whether that aid is making us less safe and less prepared for a conflict that actually might have a real impact on our lives. The very first indication of this publicly came from the US Navy Secretary, who accidentally admitted 2 months ago the day may come soon whether we have to choose between arming ourselves and arming Ukraine. Ironically, after he admitted the truth, the White House called him and immediately made him issue a correcting statement where he tried to shift the blame to weapons manufacturers and said, of course, actually it had nothing to do with Ukraine. But they protested just a little bit too much. Of course, this has always been obvious. The Western nations which supply Ukraine are not in a total war footing. Ukraine is blowing through ammo so fast they could expend the entirety of US aid by summer if they don't husband their resources. The only way they could really keep up with their weapons demand was if our economies went into overdrive to supply them, something not even the idiot, most bloodthirsty neocons would ever advocate for because obviously it would make America's population ask a lot of questions. A new report from a series of inside whistleblowers over U.S. defense readiness shows us not only has aid to Ukraine made us far less safe in our ability to prepare for conflict, but that unsurprisingly, the money that we do spend, even on ourselves, is a gigantic boondoggle. Some choice examples from this new report, quote, the United States sent Ukraine so many Stinger missiles from its own stocks, it would take 13 years worth of current production at recent capacity levels to replace them. More, America has sent so many Javelin missiles, it would take 5 years at last year's rates to replace them. They continue, according to our military's own internal figures, should a conflict break out with a major naval power like China, quote, within 1 week, the United States would run out of so-called long-range anti-ship missiles. These missiles, for reference, are what those war gamers rely on for any chance for the U.S. in any naval conflict and in a most likely hostile scenario involving Taiwan. But the point of this isn't just about the talk about Ukraine, it's to illustrate that military resources are a zero-sum game, that we have to prioritize based on strategic importance, and also that these weapons manufacturers that we rely on so heavily and who are making so much money off this, they are not even good at their jobs. As Eric Lipton points out, there are only 2 major rocket companies in America that supply all U.S. missile systems. One of them had a fire at one of their suppliers. Now the entire supply chain is backed up. Should a conflict break out, it would take months to spin up an alternative. By that time, thousands or even millions of people could be dead. Throwing money at the problem cannot even fix it. It's about decades of lost industrial manufacturing capacity and technical know-how. In fact, in the so-called moment of need, when many NATO countries were increasing the amount of weapons they wanted to buy, they could not even buy them from us because our industrial capacity was so weak we could barely keep up with the modest demand of the Ukraine war. We had to choose between supplying Ukraine and supplying actual NATO allies in the meantime. South Korea, though, of all places, stepped up. Why? Because, unlike America, South Korea is not a silly country. They have been in an effective state of war since their founding and, of course, have strict laws on the books, keeping a robust internal supply chain in the event of potential conflict with North Korea. When the war in Ukraine broke out and the West was buying weapons, they were happy to oblige because they have the ability to spin up quickly. They had the technical know-how, they basically are an allied nation already, and they had the people to actually do it. More so, they don't have to choose between themselves and others because they had so much excess at their capacity and at their fingertips. The crazy part, South Korea spends only a relative $50 billion a year on defense, or 2.7% of GDP. The America, meanwhile, spends $842 billion, or 3.3% of GDP. So we spend orders of magnitude more in both absolute and percentage-based terms, but we are weaker, less nimble, less safe. How does that work? Because of the corruption of the military-industrial complex. That's something I've always maintained here, that the size of the defense budget and the debate around it, it misses the picture. Yes, it's too big, but why? It's too big because we spend too much and spend it on the wrong stuff. US weapon systems come in ridiculously over budget. They are designed to keep factories open in different congressional districts than they are to actually make functioning weapons and protect our troops. One of my favorite examples on this is during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, while the Pentagon brass resisted spending more on mine-resistant vehicles to stop our soldiers from getting blown up by IEDs. Why? Because doing so would pull money from next-generation fighter programs and other conceptual ideas that were costing billions of dollars. They were quite literally would rather have funded things like space lasers than actually protect the lives of American boots on the ground who are getting killed in day-to-day combat. Even today, the overall dollar amount that we spend on naval assets is criminal. Another favorite example, the new Zumwalt-class destroyers, whose main guns fire rounds that cost $1 million each. The rounds are so expensive that we don't buy them, meaning that we have guns with no ammunition. But I guess it's stealthy, so stealthy it costs a few cool $400 million each. There's so many examples like this. The F-35 program, which is hundreds of billions overdue. Also, every weapon system, though, has been milked for dollars by the US taxpayers with no evidence that they actually work and are mass producible in a time of crisis and would even keep America safe. We are at a major turning point here as a country. Last times actually things were this dire, it was 1940. We had no financialization, we had a massive untapped industrial capacity. I have no doubt that eventually we might be okay should things go south, but thousands and potentially millions should not have to die before we do so. The lessons that we have forgotten were forged in blood, and unfortunately, it looks as if we may have to spill that blood again before we ever wake up from whatever this hell is going on here. And Crystal, I found this report just absolutely stunning. I'm curious what you...
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.